when you're putting a staff together, like prior to coming here, Liam, you wanted to, one, it's the talent of the coach, but also the fit. And it's not a hell of a lot different than, like from Adam's side and a player to adding it to the group. You've heard us talk about commanders, and it's really no different on that side. It's the fit, it's the talent. What do they bring that's unique? And that's a great question, man. But somebody communicate, collaborate, has unique skill set to teach. I think that's the number one top of the pile when you're teaching. Part of this is why you need to know this specific skill. This is for the game, for the coaches that make it come to life. I think that's what you see when the players can perform at their best. So those are a few of the things.
He's such a nice guy, Dan Quinn is. He's such a pleaser. I mean, every question's a great question. He really is one of the most polite coaches in a media setting that I think I have ever experienced. Good morning, everybody. That was your head coach, Dan Quinn, 2 days ago before the news broke on Cliff Kingsbury. The other piece of the news was hardly surprising. That just isn't very surprising that Joe Witt Jr. was gone. I'm surprised that anybody was surprised by that. The Cliff Kingsbury news certainly wasn't a surprise when we got to Monday and yesterday, but a week ago, it would have been a big surprise. So where does he go? It's got to be the right fit. I would be surprised now, after having so many different conversations, like everybody in town is having, if the person that's hired doesn't have some sort of tie to Jaden Daniels. That would be my guess. Who are those people? There are a couple out there. We'll talk about some of those people as we go through the morning. But right now, what's done is done, and now it's about the solution. And something that I said yesterday, I stand by, whether it's the way they're proceeding or not. And that is, you don't get rid of Cliff Kingsbury unless you know what the solution is, because that's high risk. You are, as the head coach, you are now on the clock, more so than you were before getting rid of Cliff Kingsbury. Because I think rational people, and I think people inside that building who are rational, and I would put ownership into that category, understand what happened this year. You don't, as a professional head coach or as a professional general manager or even as ownership, you don't excuse make publicly. You don't talk about, are you guys out of your minds? Do you know who we had to play this year? We were on practice squad players and then second level practice squad players. Anytime you lose your starting quarterback for essentially 14 of 17 games because he only played start to healthy completely, healthy start to finish in 3 games, only played start to finish in 4 games in total out of 17. 98% of seasons are doomed when you just lose that player for that number of games. And then they lost, obviously, wide receiver 1, running back 1, wide receiver 2, offensive guard number 1 for 6-7 games. Both defensive ends, their number 3 defensive end, both corners, et cetera, et cetera. The list goes on and on. So rational people, including people out there, can look at this year and not necessarily write it off, not necessarily say, well, that's the reason why, of course, but man, we were really bad even after all of that happened. Okay, well, look at what Adam Peters inherited when he got here in terms of depth, in terms of frontline starters. It takes more than 2 off seasons to replenish that, to get your team into a position where instead of 5-12 in an injury-ravaged season, maybe you're 8-9 or 7-10. No big difference. You're not going to be in the postseason when you lose your best players for as many games as they did, but maybe they could have been more competitive in more games with better depth. There's no doubt about that, but he hasn't had the time. So rational people out there before this big change yesterday could say, look, last year was incredible, and maybe it was, an inside straight year. We got smiled on consistently week in and week out through the course of the year. And it was a wonderful ride. And this year, the opposite happened. And we had no chance because we didn't have our best players on the field enough of the season. So let's see what next year brings. But have at it. Still believe in you. Didn't forget what happened in 2024. Whether or not we say, injuries were the reason why publicly, which is not what teams typically do. I understand as the owner. I understand as the general manager, head coach Dan Quinn. I understand what happened to your roster. I was in here trying to come up with practice squad answers and, bodies for you every week. As he described it, carnage. He said it was similar to the carnage that they had in San Francisco in 2020. Quite the challenging year for everybody. So let's reboot it and let's get after it. But that's not what they're doing. It's not what they're doing. They are going into 2026 with the head coach saying, and maybe it was the general manager saying it as well, even though he took himself completely out of the loop as far as being involved in coaching change decisions. They're very collaborative. They've spoken to that over and over again. I doubt that the move of getting rid of Cliff Kingsbury came as a surprise to Adam Peters. Of course it didn't. I doubt that he wasn't involved in flushing everything out with the head coach. But it falls on the head coach in terms of whether or not it works. And if the seat was for rational people, just slightly warm heading into 2026, 2 years after hiring a coaching staff that included a first-time defensive coordinator, someone that the head coach had a lot of experience with it in Dallas and thought he was ready to be a defensive coordinator. In Joe Witt Jr.'s defense, look, I think that was a risky move. It certainly was never apparent that they were getting more out of less, but it's not like they were loaded with talent on that side of the ball. And then this year, any talent they had, any key piece they had was lost for the season. But that was a risky hiring somebody without experience, although as a defensive head coach, presumably when he was hired, he was going to put his imprint. It was going to be his defense, and Joe Witt Jr. was going to be carrying out the Dan Quinn defensive philosophy. But the offensive coordinator hire for your rookie quarterback was a hire in which, first of all, there was competition for Cliff Kingsbury. You had to outbid at least one team. You had to pitch him that the opportunity here was better than perhaps more than one team. You brought him in here. The offense was elite in 2024. There's been a lot of back and forth, with friends of mine on this subject over the last couple of weeks. And it's gone back to various points during the season. Friends of mine that I love having football conversations with. And they're like, look, Kingsbury's good. The system fits. It was perfect for Jaden. But without Jaden's magic, none of last year happens. I agree with that. Jaden was 90% responsible for 12-5, 2 road playoff games. And by the way, not a half bad offensive performance against the best defensive team in football in the NFC Championship game. But the environment in which he was able to thrive as a rookie quarterback, having the greatest rookie season in the history of the game for that particular position, was laid out by Cliff Kingsbury. And don't underestimate game planning, scheme, and in-game play calling as part of the reason they had the success they had last year. It is mostly Jaden, no doubt, and his brilliance. But you could look at almost any elite level offense in the history of football, and 80% of those elite level offenses are going to have great quarterbacks. There are 20% of them that aren't necessarily Hall of Fame quarterbacks. I mean, Mark Rippon was not a Hall of Fame quarterback, that's for sure. And Washington's 1991 offensive football team was the best ever in the moment. So that's one example. But anyway, back to the Quinn scenario now. If the seat was just slightly warm with rational people, I'm not talking about our callers or fans or, social media, but people that I would deem to be rational, especially the people out there that, hey, we last year had this incredible year, and sure, the breaks went our way. This year, no breaks went our way. And that happens in the NFL from time to time. And we understand why 5-12 happened. But when you move on after 2 seasons, after picking this particular gentleman as your offensive coordinator and saying as one of the reasons you picked him, one of the reasons I picked him is he was so hard to game plan against when I was game planning against him, whether that was in Atlanta or in Dallas, playing Arizona when Cliff Kingsbury was the head coach in Arizona. The seat to me becomes not only warm, but warming. 2026 is Dan Quinn's year to show significant improvement from where they were last year. In fact, I would say this needs to be a playoff season in 2026. There's context around everything, and we could do that until the cows come home. If they have another season where the quarterback doesn't play enough. If that happens, that's a whole other conversation to begin with. Imagine if Jaden ends up playing 4 games next year, 7 total, but 4 complete, 3 completely healthy. That's going to be the dominant conversation at that point anyway, because at that point, the conversation about them getting it right versus getting it wrong becomes a legitimate conversation. I don't think it's legitimate now. He played in every game last year as a rookie. He didn't miss but 2 games as a college player. This year is the aberration. Nothing that came before it was. This year is. But if next year we get the same thing, and it's, by the way, not one serious injury, but 3 or 4 different injuries, then it's not an aberration anymore. Then it's 2025 and 2026, and that becomes the big story. And moving on from Quinn almost becomes secondary, because then we're talking about Adam Peters and the decision he made. When he had, as an example, Drake May as an option. I don't think that's going to be the conversation. I have to go based on just history, which is this guy has played a lot more games healthy than he has unhealthy, like almost all of them until this year. So if he's healthy, they'll be much better next year. They've got to fix the defense, though. They have to fix the defense. But to me, moving on from the guy that was a big part, or at least a part, in many ways, more of a part of it than the head coach was, in 12-5, 2 road playoff wins with a top 5 across the board, almost any category you look at, top 3 in a lot of categories, offensive football team. And moving on from him after 2 years, where, again, I've said this a few times, and, I don't think it's personally debatable. The numbers would certainly suggest that this is true. And that is, considering what Cliff Kingsbury had to deal with this year, second string quarterbacks, third string quarterbacks, second, third, fourth practice squad receivers, etc. The fact that they finished pretty much in the middle of the pack in the league across the board offensively, advanced numbers, traditional numbers, is a testament to him. I mean, I've mentioned this a few times. I know that the last 2 games of the year, not everybody was paying attention. I don't blame you. Christmas Day against the Cowboys, better things to do. The season finale against the Eagles, better football to watch. But the way Josh Johnson played those final 2 games, especially after what we saw of him off the bench against the Eagles. I mean, the conversation about, and I know it was not a majority of you, but the people that thought that somehow it was embarrassing that they only beat the Eagles backups by 7 points. I mean, that is a twisted way to look at that game. Washington's been playing with their backups and the backups to the backups basically since week 8 or week 9, week 7, actually, the Dallas game. I mean, Washington tested Philadelphia's starters 3 weeks ago. They had the lead at halftime with backups to the backups on the field, the backup quarterback, and then had to go to the third string quarterback in the game. And they were right there with a chance in the fourth quarter against the Philadelphia starters. What they were able to accomplish, what Cliff was offensively, was, I think, impressive this year. I think he got more out of less. And on the flip side, it never happened. They never got more out of less defensively last year or this year. I mean, the one game you can point to, and it's a little bit dicey to do it, but the Detroit playoff game where they turned Detroit over 5 times, and that was the first takeaway game, big takeaway game of the season. And it was instrumental in winning that game. But they also basically gave up 7 to 8 yards per play in that game. But they got the takeaways. But when you think about, Cliff's offense, basically this is one part that always gets underrated in the conversation of offensive football. When you have a terrible defense, like historically bad franchise-wise, you take the field knowing we can't punt or we got to play differently. I've mentioned this a couple of times, and Ben and I got into it the other day on the air about this. Yes, they're number 1 in the league in no huddle, and it's not close. But also, yes, they're middle of the pack in pace of play. Pace of play meaning when do you snap the ball with how much time left on the play clock. They're not snapping it faster. They're not running more offensive plays than a lot of other teams. This isn't a college up-tempo. I've heard people describe the offense as air raid. Just so you know, you can't even run the air raid in the NFL. Hashes, 3-yard ineligible downfield, offensive line splits, the whole thing. That there's nothing there. There may be air raid elements to the pass design and route combinations, etc., but you can't run Hal Mummy and Mike Leach air raid in the NFL. It's not a spread college offense. It's not 70% RPO. That's not what it is. You can't do it at that level in the NFL. I'm on a tangent and I'm moving past this. All I'm saying is that Cliff Kingsbury got more out of less with a horrendous defense that could never get off the field and always put the team week in and week out in a position in which they were chasing the score for the most part. That happened a lot last year, too. How many of those comebacks because the defense was so bad? Do you know how hard it is to be a good offensive team when your defense is as bad as Washington's defense was this year? And they were in the middle of the pack of everything. So back to the core message here. Dan Quinn put himself out on the limb for real. And I'm talking about with rational people in positions that can be impactful to his future. He is now officially on a very warm seat, much warmer than it was before moving on from Kingsbury. Because here's the deal. You can do a lot worse than Cliff Kingsbury. A lot worse. Now, with all that said, I will repeat what I have said going back to even before they hired Dan Quinn. My preference offensively, personally, is more of a Shanahan style, more under center, instead of being under center the least amount in the league, being under center more. Being under center, by the way, for the under center teams that lead the league, it's still less than 50% of the time or slightly more than 50% of the time. I think most of you know that. You're still in shotgun or pistol a hell of a lot, even when you are an under center, air quotes team. But that's my preference. I would prefer that, and I think Jaden would thrive in that. And I think in some ways it would be better for the long-term of his career to be in that style of offense. But I also know that the offense he was in with Cliff was really good for him as well, because I think he would be good in pretty much any offense. By the way, even in a Shanahan style offense, don't think that that means that the offensive coordinator isn't going to utilize Jaden's legs, isn't going to, really want Jaden to be a runner when it's necessary to be a runner. Jaden Daniels is never going to be, unless he has so many injuries that he can't move at some point, but he's never going to be Kirk Cousins or Joe Flacco in the pocket. Those quarterbacks are dying off big time. You have to have the ability to extend plays in the NFL with your legs to throw or with your legs to run. That can be inside the pocket, that can be outside the pocket. But if you're not one of those guys, the chances of great success aren't that high. All right, let's talk about what could be next. And we'll open up phone lines as well. 301 230 0980, 301 230 0980. I think that the person that ends up getting hired, and I hope that this is somebody that's already in the mix. Again, I'd have a big issue if they just decided I just don't believe in Cliff's scheme, or I just don't believe in, this anymore. I want it to be different without having that person who can make what you want in terms of the change happen. Because if you get out there and that person isn't available to you, and then you're scrambling to come up with an answer, I've heard Brian Dable's name pop up. I mentioned it yesterday on the show. I think Brian Dable's a really good offensive coordinator, offensive play caller, etc. But that's not a Shanahan style move. That wouldn't be a massive change from what they have. All right, let's talk about what's next. We'll open up phone lines. And what I want to hear from you, because yesterday the news kind of broke later on in the show. We knew it was kind of coming at the beginning of the show, and we did take a lot of calls yesterday. But 301 230 0980, your reaction to Kingsbury being gone, and then who would you like to see as the offensive coordinator replacement? Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com.
And then there's been a lot of talk about Cliff, his future here with a head coaching job or whatever. What have been your thoughts on him as a coordinator and just, in the offense?
I mean, I love working with Cliff. Me and him have a special relationship. We kind of built that over his past 2 years. I kind of just wish I was out there more to play for him this past year. So, I mean, that's kind of the focus for me in this offseason is just rebuilding myself from the ground up and, hopefully go out there. And that's the most important thing, to be available for my team.
Jaden Daniels, the day before we got the news that Cliff Kingsbury was gone, we also know that Jaden's mom, which we read that tweet yesterday, said, let's run it back for year 3. JD5, KK is in Cliff Kingsbury. And then yesterday, I guess after the show in the afternoon, this Jordan Schultz, who we've talked about him before. I know, Max. The Schultz report. He is, I think, Howard Schultz's son, yes, the founder of Starbucks, right?
Yep, that's right.
And didn't we decide? I'm the worst at this. You follow it, and many of you guys out there follow it much more than I do. It's not my favorite thing to do, which is to audit who's right and who's wrong on social media. I don't follow as many people. Well, I probably do, but they pop up in my timeline. And didn't we decide that this guy gets things right occasionally?
Yeah, occasionally he does get some things right. It is concerning, the report that was put out there yesterday about
yeah. So let me read from the report that he put out there yesterday. He put out a report that said, my understanding is that key Commanders offensive players, including quarterback Jaden Daniels, are disappointed with the team's decision to part ways with offensive coordinator Cliff Kingsbury. Daniels vouched for him to stay in his presser on Monday and was among those blindsided by the move. Offensive players on the team figured the only way Kingsbury would be gone is if he got a head coaching job. By the way, I've seen a lot of Kingsbury to Baltimore conversation, him teaming up with Lamar Jackson. Cliff's going to land somewhere. I don't know if it's going to be as a head coach, but I bet he lands somewhere. There's all of a sudden a lot of openings, and I know it seems like that every year, but what are there now? 7 head coaching opportunities and their coordinator opportunities, and the Harbaugh news yesterday really opens up possibilities for Washington because of the various head coaching jobs he might take, creating another firing, like a Mike McDaniel, as an example, in Miami. That's a possibility. And then all of a sudden, Mike McDaniel is available. I want to be clear on something. I can't imagine. I'm not saying it's not possible, but I can't imagine that you would fire Cliff Kingsbury without having your solution already pretty much locked up. So why won't we hear from it about that today or tomorrow? Maybe we will. Or maybe that person's in the postseason and we're going to have to wait on it. But that to me, if that kind of move when you fire somebody without the solution, that speaks to something more than I just have a philosophical difference with you, Cliff, and I want to move in another direction. And by the way, if Quinn really feels that strongly about it, look, it's his ass next year. He shouldn't stick with something that innately he feels isn't the right thing to have regrets then a year later about not doing something about it. So kudos to Dan Quinn if he felt so strongly about this that regardless of whether or not there's great risk, he decided to take it. But you got to have the solution, man. This isn't Joe Witt Jr. That's an easy see you later, and we'll figure it out after you're gone. With a Cliff Kingsbury, you got to have it figured out. So let's go through the possibilities here. And I think, Jaden, if that report is right and he was blindsided, that means that they didn't certainly consult him on it, nor should they in that particular instance. And they certainly shouldn't consult Jaden's mom, all due respect. because parents shouldn't be involved in any of this stuff and shouldn't be influential in any of this stuff, as we've, found out. We lived through it 13 years ago. So I mean, here's the list that I've come up with, and there are probably some names missing from this. But you start with your own staff. It looks like David Blau could potentially move on to Detroit to replace Johnny Morton as the offensive coordinator. I think Dan Campbell probably doesn't want to get back into the play calling business. David Blau, we've talked about him since Washington hired him. He is apparently super impressive to anybody that spends time with him. He's a guy that's been lurking on the Dan Quinn staff now for 2 seasons, is a guy that I think everybody understands will eventually be an offensive coordinator and head coach. So Blau may have been an internal answer to this, but there is a lot of reporting out there that says he's going to go back to Detroit, where he played quarterback as a, deep down the roster quarterback, and be the offensive coordinator there. You've got Anthony Lynn on the staff. You've got Brian Johnson, who was an OC in Philadelphia, on the staff. My belief is this hire will be an outside hire, not an elevation from their own staff, which kind of, when the staff was hired there, and I'm not knocking the staff that was hired. Now, the coordinator hires 2 years later, you're swapping out your coordinators, and not because they are, Aaron Glenn and Ben Johnson getting head coaching gigs. You didn't lose your coordinators because they got head coaching gigs. That's a golf clap, great job, great hires. They're so good, other people want them. This is a Detroit situation in that you're going to have 2 new coordinators in 2026, but it's not for the same reasons why. Joe Witt Jr. is not going to be a head coach. Cliff Kingsbury might be, but that's not why they moved on from him. They didn't move on from Cliff Kingsbury because he got hired to be a head coach. He might get hired to be a head coach, but he hasn't yet. And that's not the reason they moved on from him. Yeah, I think they're going outside. And so let's look at some of the obvious, all right? Mike McDaniel, all right? The reason now Mike McDaniel might be available is because John Harbaugh got fired in Baltimore, and John Harbaugh is going to be everybody's number one. Maybe not everybody's, but if you've got an opening, you are reaching out to John Harbaugh representation and saying, we want to interview John Harbaugh for our opening at head coach. Now, Miami technically doesn't have an opening because they haven't fired Mike McDaniel, but that doesn't stop them from potentially reaching out to John Harbaugh and talking about John Harbaugh's interest in the Miami Dolphins. So if Harbaugh goes to Miami, Mike McDaniel's out, and Mike McDaniel becomes a potential offensive coordinator candidate in Washington. Why would that be attractive? Well, Mike McDaniel is an absolute offensive-minded, Shanahan-style head coach who knows how to coordinate and call an offense. He was with Quinn in Atlanta because he was with Kyle in Atlanta when Kyle was the offensive coordinator the year that Atlanta went to the Super Bowl. So there is a tie to Dan Quinn. I mentioned yesterday Mike LaFleur. Mike LaFleur is currently the offensive coordinator in Los Angeles for Sean McVay. But Sean McVay calls the plays. Mike LaFleur doesn't. Mike LaFleur was with Kyle and Quinn in Atlanta, part of the whole Shanahan tree. Mike, Kyle, then the Sean McVay tree, but everybody's kind of all together, and they all do similar things, even though they're not identical. Sean runs formationally a lot more pistol than Kyle does. There are different iterations of the Shanahan scheme with each of these guys. Each of these guys have put their own spin on it, including Mike McDaniel. But Mike LaFleur, the current OC in Los Angeles, not the play caller, but the OC, could he be someone that Washington would reach out to. I mentioned yesterday a number of people, two people in particular, from Liam Cohen's staff. Liam Cohen was with Sean McVay in Los Angeles. And I mentioned the name Grant Udinski, their current offensive coordinator. The season they've had, the resurrection of Trevor Lawrence's career. Spencer Whipple is the quarterback's coach there. His father was a longtime college coach and also worked in the NFL. I've had Mark Whipple on this show before to talk quarterbacks, especially leading into drafts, etc. And he's a real offensive mind and a highly respected guy in coaching circles. His son, Spencer, the quarterback's coach, apparently is a rising star as a coach as well. So you look at Jacksonville staff. That is the Shanahan, McVay tree. Liam Cohen was with Sean in L.A. And by the way, their OC, Grant Udinski, was with Kevin O'Connell in Minnesota. You look at, another guy from the McVay group in L.A. is Zach Robinson. Zach Robinson has been the offensive coordinator in Atlanta. The Atlanta staff just got boomed. Raheem Morris and company gone. So what about Zach Robinson? He is out of work looking for something. I will tell you that in watching Atlanta a little bit more than some other teams other than our own, in part because, well, not in part, but solely because who has been a quarterback there for the last 2 years at times, replaced by Michael Penix Jr. But you want to talk about a lot of, shotgun and pistol, that's Zach Robinson. Sean with Stafford, there's a lot of pistol. There's a lot of under center, too. A lot of under center, a lot of pistol. And they, with Kirk coming off the Achilles last year, didn't have him under center nearly enough. They got back to it with him when he got into the starting lineup, but Michael Penix was primarily in shotgun and pistol. That's a Shanahan-style zone run scheme, play action, boot, the whole thing, but not done as much under center with Michael Penix Jr. Zach Robinson. I'm not a big fan of Zach Robinson after watching the 2 years in Atlanta, but he's part of that tree. Clint Kubiak, who is the offensive coordinator in Seattle and will be a head coaching candidate, and with these openings, isn't where you would go. But his brother, Clay Kubiak, these are Gary Kubiak's sons, all off the Shanahan tree. Clay Kubiak's in San Francisco right now with Kyle, not calling plays because that's what Kyle does. Clay Kubiak is a potential name. Remember the name Bobby Slowick? Remember before Dan Quinn was hired, the list of potential head coaching candidates? Bobby Slowick had done wonders with C.J. Stroud in his rookie year. And Bobby Slowick was a name. Bobby Slowick did not get a head coaching job, but he is part of the Shanahan tree, and he was with Peters in San Francisco. I just wrote his name down. I saw this name, bandied about a lot, and I was a little bit surprised by it. Darrell Bevell. He was with Quinn in Seattle. He's in Miami with McDaniel now. So he does have now the McDaniel ties. But Darrell Bevell was also, the coordinator with Russell Wilson when, you guys like to use this description, a college offense. None of these are really college offenses or spread offenses. Again, we're getting into the minutiae here. But when Russell Wilson in 2012, off of what Kyle was doing in Washington with RG3 in 2012, and all of a sudden 15 to 20% of the offense became zone read, and the quarterback was keeping it on some of those zone reads 4 or 5 times a game. That's what they went to with Russell Wilson. That was Darrell Bevell's real coming out, was with Russell Wilson in Seattle. I mean, perhaps, being a part of the Miami situation, you have, more of a Shanahan style approach. I've seen that name bandied about a lot. I've not heard that name from anybody that I've talked to, but he was Seattle's offensive coordinator for, when Quinn was there, under Pete Carroll for 5-6 years. So yeah. And then he's been in Miami with McDaniel for the last couple of years. So Darrell Bevell is an interesting name. I think those are the names that all, for me, fit under sort of the Shanahan tree? Okay, what about others? What about Brian Dable? I mentioned his name yesterday. That would not be a Shanahan scheme necessarily. The real success that he had with Daniel Jones the one year that they went to the playoffs and actually won a playoff game. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I'm going to guess that they were nowhere near a leader in under center snaps. Obviously, with Josh Allen, where he really made his bones as an offensive coordinator in Buffalo, he certainly has experience working with a quarterback and utilizing the quarterback's legs. If you've listened to me, it's a one pet peeve of the Kingsbury thing. And I don't have a problem with it with other quarterbacks, but I don't view Jaden Daniels like I view Josh Allen or, say, Cam Newton. I just never liked a lot of the non-quarterback draw designed runs, quarterback counter, quarterback power. I think those plays end in a pile more than 50% of the time, and I think that they're the highest risk, other than in the pocket is actually where a quarterback is at his highest risk. Most injuries for quarterbacks happen in the pocket when eyes are down the field and there's a lot of stuff happening, at their feet and knees, etc. But in terms of, I don't have a problem with designed runs. And in certain situations, 11-on-11 football with the quarterback being a part of the run game, I love it. But I just didn't like middle of the field, first, second quarter, quarterback power on 2nd and 7. Why have your quarterback end up in a pile? And Brian Dable runs a lot of that. Ran a lot of that with Josh Allen, with Daniel Jones in New York, etc. But Brian Dable's name is out there. I got to be honest with you, I don't see it with Brian Dable. That one is a disconnect for me. It doesn't make sense. If Quinn wanted to move on from Kingsbury philosophically, system-wise, etc., Brian Dable's not the hire. Even though I think Brian Dable's an excellent offensive coordinator and play caller. Again, there are lots of different ways to do this. The Shanahan style system, my favorite, isn't the only one. I just don't see Brian Dable as being the hire. I might be wrong, and no one's told me that I'm right as far as that's concerned, but that to me is not the right connection. I also don't think Todd Monken is necessarily the right connection, although it's a little bit different from Dable because Monken really got the most out of Lamar as a passer. Last year, Lamar Jackson looked like an on-the-verge, polished, pocket passer more than he had ever looked in his career. So, you've heard the reports, I'm sure, that there, was more tension between Lamar and Monken than Lamar and Harbaugh. We've got a guest on, by the way. My guy Bobby Trossett from Baltimore is going to join us on the show today. We'll find out what's going on in Baltimore. But I don't see Monken as a possibility, personally. And Dable's the one to me out of the names that have been thrown out there that I've seen that I think he's very good at what he does. Don't get me wrong. And I think he'll be hired somewhere. I don't see him for Dan Quinn, based on what Quinn, I think, is looking for and looking to get away from. And then there's this name. I'm not telling you that this is the guy at all. I'm just telling you that one of the things that I think will be in play here is somebody that maybe Jaden's comfortable with. That could be somebody that he's worked with before, or it's somebody that he'll be immediately comfortable with and they understand that. And let me just say this as an overall Jaden Daniels take. I don't see Jaden Daniels or his mother becoming a problem in all of this with Kingsbury gone. I don't. In some ways, the tweet from the mother was probably in anticipation of this happening and just to show her support. I think the love for Cliff with Jaden, and by the way, Marcus Mariota as well, I think that's totally genuine. I think they really liked Cliff. But I don't think that Jaden Daniels is a shot caller or presumes to be, or wants to be. This is a different personality than we dealt with 13 years ago, completely. The name that I'm going to give you, I will give you when we come back. And then I'll take your calls. Your reaction to Kingsbury gone, and who do you want? 301-230-0980. But there's one name that I don't know if anybody's mentioned. Haven't followed everybody on this. But I'm going to give it to you just in the event that it's a long shot, crazy hire. And you're not surprised because you heard me say it first. I don't think it's going to happen, but I'll share with you who that person is when we come back. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. This was Jaden Daniels back in April of 2024, before the draft. He wrote a column for the Players Tribune, and he wrote the following about a gentleman named Mike Denbrock. Mike Denbrock was LSU's offensive coordinator when Jaden Daniels transferred to LSU for the 2022 and 2023 seasons. Jaden wrote, I went into the transfer portal and my phone blew up. I'm getting calls from coaches everywhere, but there was something about Coach Brian Kelly. I was really just looking for a new home, but I also wanted to go to a bigger program to be on a bigger stage. And I remember when we first met, he said, man, I really want you to be here. And it wasn't just him either. The offensive coordinator at the time that's now at Notre Dame, Mike Denbrock, I was on a Zoom call with him, and he was like, man, I just want to help you get to where you want to go. My parents taught me a lot about recognizing who's genuine and who's not, who's trying to bluff me. And I don't know, everything just felt super authentic. He could have pitched me, I'll make you a first-round pick or I'll make you a Heisman Trophy winner. But he was like, I just want to help you achieve your goals in your life. He had full belief in me. That's what put him over the top. So that was from him. Now, Mike Denbrock, since coaching Jaden Daniels at LSU to not only a Heisman Trophy, but to one of the great seasons we have ever seen by an offense and by a quarterback in college football history. Denbrock's currently at Notre Dame as the offensive coordinator. And by the way, has said things about Jeremiah Love. Listen closely, Paulie, where he's compared Jeremiah Love to Jaden Daniels when it comes to their work ethic and their smarts. But Mike Denbrock said about Jaden Daniels' rookie season, quote, nothing that Jaden Daniels does surprises me at all. I say that not because it's some stroke of luck or anything else. I know the preparation he goes through. I know his process. I know how important playing good football is for not only himself, but for the people around him, how much pride he takes in helping others do better. Now, who is Mike Denbrock? Well, he was the offensive coordinator at LSU, somebody whose relationship with Jaden was very close. He's been a very successful offensive coordinator going back to his days at Cincinnati. You know, when Cincinnati was rising as a program before they actually made the playoff, the 4-team playoff back then. Brian Kelly brought him to LSU. He was the OC and play caller for Jaden in his 2 seasons, 2022 and 2023, and then went to Notre Dame last year with Marcus Freeman, where he's been the offensive coordinator and play caller there. I was looking for just somebody who's out there that really Jaden trusts, has a great relationship with, and that is a guy he's not been in the NFL. Okay, he's never coached in the NFL. It's always been in college. But that's the kind of guy that if you had a solution already when you moved on from Kingsbury, it might be somebody like Mike Denbrock. Just throwing it out there. I haven't seen, I searched it actually during the break to see if anybody else put those two together. And I see a couple just random saying the best fit for Jaden in the NFL would be his OC at LSU, Mike Denbrock. Now, in doing a little bit of research and remembering Jaden's seasons, lots of shotgun, not a lot of under center, a lot of pass first to set up the run, which, by the way, is really the way the NFL works. You know, the idea of we're going to line up and we're going to run it 50 times down your throat, that's just... I personally, I've said this for a long time now, as much as there's an old school element to what I believe in when it comes to coaching from a fan standpoint, I don't care how you move the football and score points. I don't care at all how you do it. If you told me that we were going to get Cliff Kingsbury, Jaden Daniels, 2024 on repeat, sign me up. Sign me up. But I do have a preference, but yeah, he is pass first and kind of looking through his history as an offensive coordinator, but a very successful offensive coordinator in a lot of places that he has gone, but not the under center, lots of play action coach, FYI. Just a name to throw out there. What's yours? Who do you want? 301-230-0980. And what's your reaction to Kingsbury being gone? Calls next. What do you want to see happen, Max?
You know, that's a great question. I really don't know right now. It's kind of Mike LaFleur feels like the most obvious choice here just because of like how coaching trees go. I do feel like that he's probably the most attainable in terms of guys that need to kind of step up in their progression, like, learning the play calling and getting comfortable with that and all of it. I'll tell you who I don't want, though, and we were just talking about this in the break. I don't want Brian Dable. And you said the exact reason I don't want him is because he's basically just another Cliff Kingsbury. And I say that like in the fact that running Jackson Dart into 6 separate concussions this year is not a great sign, or not something I want on this team, especially when Jaden has the injury history that he already has. And then you go back even further, he did the same thing with Josh Allen. So I just can't do it with Dable. And then Monken, I think that John Harbaugh still wants him as his OC wherever John Harbaugh ends up. I did see some reporting on that this morning on my timeline. So we're going to find out, I guess, as things shake out. But yeah, Kevin Stefanski would be nice, but Mike LaFleur is probably at the top of my list.
Oh, yeah, I forgot to mention Stefanski, of course. But I think I didn't even put him down here because I'm just assuming Stefanski's going to get a head coaching job.
You would expect. But, I mean, man, you never know. It's a weird time, especially with the Harbaugh firing kind of shakes some things up because now we don't even know what's going to happen in Miami. Like Mike McDaniel could be available. So I wouldn't hate that. Shanahan, tree guy. We kind of talked about it a little bit earlier in the season. He was one of my buy or sells as a potential candidate if Cliff Kingsbury were to make an exit. So
wait, who was? I forget.
McDaniel. Because it was because it was going bad in the middle of the season. The writing felt like it was on the wall, but now,
right,
interesting things going on in Miami. But that's kind of where I'm at.
Just on Brian Dable, like I guess I was surprised to see his name pop up in part because not because I don't think Brian Dable is a capable offensive mind and game planner and play caller. I think he is. I think what he did with Josh Allen and what he did even in that one truly healthy season for Daniel Jones in New York was outstanding. I just, if the reason for moving on from Cliff Kingsbury, which I would think this would be a pretty strong possibility as the primary reason, is that Dan Quinn just philosophically wants to go in a different direction offensively, which, by the way, all due respect to Dan Quinn, who I do like, it's not like you didn't know what you were getting when you hired him last year. It's not like you didn't get the incredible results, the second best head coaching results of your career with him as the offensive coordinator. And you can easily, even though you don't publicly say this, I get it, when it comes to injuries, say, my God, my guy, did a hell of a job with what we gave you this year with all the players that were out. Because the truth is, he did a pretty decent job this year. The offense did not crater like the defense did. And it was missing more of its truly dynamic best players than the defense was. But I just don't see Brian Dable. I don't think you move on from Cliff Kingsbury to add Brian Dable to the mix. That's where that would be a disconnect for me. 301-230-0980. What's your reaction to Kingsbury being gone? And then who would you like to see Dan Quinn hire as the offensive coordinator? Let's start with our guy, Aveen. Aveen, go ahead.
Hey, Kevin. Let me first say that Cliff Kingsbury is the coach far and away most responsible for their 24 season. Jaden played a big part for it as a coach.
Of the coaches.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. I think Quinn had something to do with it too. I think the leadership, the culture changed the whole thing. I think that played into it. But go ahead.
Yeah, and I'll also just say this, this season, I don't know if you mentioned this, but they finished 9th in offensive success rate. And the only other 2 non-playoff offenses that were in the top 10 were 2 super talented offenses in the Bengals and Colts. So I still think he did a really good job this year.
I agree.
But that being said, I'm going into this with an open mind. Maybe I'll give Dan Quinn some benefit of the doubt because I think he did nail the Kingsbury hiring. But, maybe with the way the league is trending and with what's best for Jaden's growth and development, maybe it is a more Shanahan style coordinator. I love watching, the Jaguars offense. I think, what Cohen has done is like crazy good with Trevor Lawrence. So I'd love to see something like that. I'd love to see anything Shanahan McVay. But I have a question for you about this, Kevin, which is that I think Quinn going into this year, it was going to be, I don't think he's ever at risk of getting fired in season, but it was going to be a make or break kind of tenuous year. So that kind of makes me not like if he's getting, sole authority, a guy in the make or break year, if he's getting like most of the authority on making this big decision for Jaden Daniels, because he might not even be here the next season. So I'm just wondering how much collaboration between him and Peters is going on. And it doesn't sit right to me if this guy, who's overseeing 2 really bad defenses, it was always going to be a tenuous year because of that, because he's a defensive head coach. This guy's making, big call on Jaden in his next coordinator.
Yeah, I'm not sure what your specific question was. I think, though, I get the general gist of it, and that is we've got a guy that, I don't think that this is, a lame duck season. That's not what it is, obviously, because if they do well, Dan Quinn's going to have a chance to stay here for a while, if next year becomes a good season. But it's definitely a warm and a warmer seat situation than I think it was before yesterday. I would definitely agree with that. Now, with respect to, him making that hire and he may not be here in 2027, one of the reasons he may not be here in 2027 is he didn't get the hire right. So I don't know how to answer that question other than to say, Aveen, the head coach, and especially a head coach following a season like this one, if you're a well-functioning organization, has the opportunity to make a decision like this, but he's going to be accountable for this decision and a lot faster than he would have had he stuck with Cliff Kingsbury. Making the change from a guy who, by the way, I just looked this up while you were on, because I knew it went up a little bit after Sunday. Washington finished 4th in the league in red zone offense. That's a rather critical offensive category. There's no way that most of you out there would have ever guessed that. They finished 4th in the NFL behind Philly, Cincinnati, and Buffalo in red zone offense in 2025. You mentioned what they finished 9th in. They're somewhere between 14th and 21st in almost every other offensive category. Given that you played your starting quarterback hardly at all, this was an example of getting more out of less. Whether you like Kingsbury and his system and his play calling consistency or not, the bottom line is the results were more out of less offensively for Washington this year, and that followed an elite offensive team in 2024, and you're moving on from that. So you better be right. You better be right.
Mm-hmm.
How about that, though, Aveen? 4th in red zone offense, final numbers.
I know. It was really good. I'll have a quick question for you, Kevin, just about the attractiveness of this position. Jaden being here makes it super attractive, but
right.
Dan Quinn in this tenuous situation, like, what do you think the attractiveness is for?
Actually, I don't think that's going to play into it. It's not a lame duck season. It is. It's a pressure season, no doubt. But the reason that it's an attractive job is A, yes, Jaden Daniels more than anything else, but B, it's a defensive head coach. So you are going to have, more likely than not, a ton of autonomy. Offensive coordinators don't want to be typically in a position with an offensive head coach, especially if that guy's a play caller. So being with a defensive head coach, you're going to have that autonomy. So it's very attractive. And look, there are a lot of coaches that will be on warm seats heading into next year, a ton of them. So the opportunities that exist are typically not with solidified situations, although a Seattle could be if a Clint Kubiak gets a head coaching job, or if a Grant Udinski gets a head coaching job off of the success in Jacksonville. Thanks, Aveen, as always. Let's go to Chris in Annapolis. Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Kevin.
Sure, Chris.
I just want to say I'm really proud of I think it's Peters, it might be Quinn, for getting rid of what I think is a B coordinator. And I think it's one of these moves that's really hard to do because he is pretty good. But I think he puts us in a position where we're kind of the nail instead of the hammer. And I don't think that's just a playoff winning style. I feel like we're like a James Harden basketball team. And I know we won a couple games last year.
I hate that, by the way. Harden, to me, is the most joyless player in the league to watch. Just joyless.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Well, how about, Dan Marino, one of the greatest quarterbacks ever, never won a Super Bowl. Peyton Manning put up huge numbers every year, played good defenses. They were never the hammer against these good defenses in the playoffs. I just think there's
what's Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes together been, Chris?
Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. Number one, Spagnuolo is a great D coordinator. Number two, Pat Mahomes is as good as they've ever come.
Okay, I'm just saying that if you're talking about systems and philosophies, that's not an under center Shanahan style offense.
No, and just to say, Andy Reid won a ton of games and was always known for losing in the playoffs when he was with Philly.
Right.
And he had a good quarterback.
You're right.
McNabb isn't great, but you just have to really thread the needle. If when you're playing a great defense, you can't win by running the ball. I'm not saying I want to run the ball 90% of the time. I'm saying there are teams that are going to kick your quarterback's butt if you don't force them to stop the run first. And Kingsbury's not going to beat that team. I don't think he's ever going to beat that team. I don't think he's ever going to beat Minnesota.
The irony of what you're saying, and I've had a hard time articulating this over the last few days, and even when the conversation came up during the course of the season, because my perception of watching my team is that we're not, a run first. We're not a ram it down your throat. We're not a, downhill team. And by the way, I do think running the football and stopping the run is a formula that's tried and true, no doubt. But they, percentage-wise, have been one of the heavier run-to-pass oriented teams in the league under Cliff Kingsbury. And yes, going back to last year, do I want my quarterback being my leading rusher in 10 games? I don't. Do I want my quarterback being the leading rusher for the season? I don't. But they were still third in rush offense, top 5 in rush attempts, top 10 in, run to pass percentage. And this year, they're 4th in rush offense, they're 9th in rushing attempts, and they didn't use the quarterback as much in the run game. It was primarily their 2 running backs that ended up with, not only being the leading rushers on the team, but being the majority, ball carriers. I've seen a bunch of numbers out there, where people are incredulous as to actually what the numbers say about Washington's proclivity to run the football. But do I think that the Minnesota first or second, third, and fourth down sequence a month ago, that was bad play calling? I do. And by the way, you know who else said that? Cliff Kingsbury said that. Can I just take a moment, and I've already taken many of your moments, Chris. So that Minnesota game, I think it could have been the moment in which Dan Quinn, if he was already starting to think about it, that may have cemented it in his mind that he was going to make a change. Because if you recall, they moved the football down the field, after, by the way, making J.J. McCarthy look like Joe Montana, not only on that opening drive, but throughout the game. I mean, there are people that haven't played football more than 3 or 4 times that could have riddled our defense this year. And J.J. McCarthy had himself the greatest day of his career. Of course he did. But you're down there, and Chris Rodriguez has run you down to the 2-yard line, and it's 2nd and goal, and you go tackle eligible, incomplete. You go another pass play, incomplete, and then you go a 4th down pass play. Deebo Samuel dropped the touchdown pass from Jaden. He did. It would have made us forget the play calling, but he dropped it. And Dan Quinn was annoyed in the postgame at that, was annoyed the next day. And then here was Cliff's quote when he talked later in that week about the play calling sequence against Minnesota. He said, there are 30 plays in that game. I wish I'd called something differently, and I wish one of those plays would have worked, but they didn't, unfortunately. So that's the nature of being a play caller. But, there weren't a lot of great play calls in that game, and that's, like I said, that's all me, and I got to get better, close quote. I'm telling you that Minnesota first, second and goal, third and goal, fourth and goal sequence may not have been the first time Quinn thought about it, but it may have been the moment that it was cemented in his mind that he was going to have to do something at offensive coordinator, because he didn't like the play calling there. And Dan Quinn is a pleaser in these press conferences, but that post Minnesota and following day was the most annoyed and the most upset that he's been, other than calling Quan Martin out last week, about losing, Turpin on the bomb against Dallas on Christmas Day. So anyway, did you have any? I want to get to some other calls, Chris, but go ahead and finish up if you want to.
Real quick. It's just a simple question that I think people need. If we have to run the ball to beat a team, will Cliff do it enough? Not can he, will he?
Fair question.
And I think that's the problem.
Yeah, the numbers aside, which don't say that Cliff isn't a run the football guy, I think that's the best way. If it came to, we got a chance to run the football to win this game, would he consistently commit to it? That I kind of feel like the answer is no, even though a lot of the numbers say otherwise. Thanks for the call, Chris. Those of you on hold, stay there. We'll keep taking calls on this. Your reaction to Kingsbury and then moving on from him. Joe Witt Jr. was a given, obviously, and we'll talk defensive coordinator hires as well. But I think Kingsbury is, without question, the story of the week. 301-230-0980. What's your reaction to it, and who would you like to see them replace Kingsbury with? Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. Max just sent me something again from this guy, Jordan Schultz. Take it for what it's worth. He's the NFL, he calls himself an NFL insider. Look, he's had some stuff in the past. I know you'd have to come up with what it was, but I know that
a lot of the Terry stuff came from him. A lot of stuff from Terry's side came from him during.
Oh, is that what it was?
Yeah, a lot of it did come from Jordan Schultz. Yeah.
So we read his tweet earlier about Jaden and others in the offensive side of the building being blindsided by the news and not necessarily being happy about the news that Kingsbury's gone. Here's his latest tweet just moments ago. Sources: part of the issue the Commanders have had in the building is the front office meddling with the coaching staff on personnel and which players to use, an ongoing problem dating back to 2024 when they were having success. With the team struggling this year, it reached new heights and there were notable disagreements. Moreover, I've not gotten the impression Dan Quinn wanted to move on from his coordinators. The entire disconnect is one to watch as we head into 2026. There's a lot of S going on there, a source said. Close quote. I can't tell you that I've heard anything about meddling or a big sort of confrontational tone between coaching staff and front office. I'm not saying that it's not true. I'm just telling you that's not anything that I've heard in any conversation that I've had. I know that Diana said that there was a disconnect between Adam Peters and Cliff Kingsbury. And let me just say that I think that, Adam Peters, not putting himself into the group that makes coaching change decisions is the right way to handle it publicly. But I would doubt very seriously that he's not involved in those conversations and isn't perhaps even influential in those conversations. But I have not heard about any, meddling between front office and coaching staff issues, especially last year. And he said that it started back in 2024. When you have a 5-12 season, it happens everywhere, man. The stories, whether they're real or not, and some are and some aren't, they are just numerous. It's a lot easier to get people to talk or even people to, perform when you're in a losing situation. Let's go to Miguel in Falls Church. Miguel, your reaction to Kingsbury being gone, and who would you like to replace him? Go ahead.
Hey, Kevin. Good morning. I'm with you. I think it's a high risk move by Quinn. At this point, you got a quarterback who had a good rapport with Kingsbury. That was noted that he had a good working relationship with a young quarterback. So I didn't agree with the move. I think moving forward, I disagree with you on my number one choice would be Todd Monken. If I'm in Dan Quinn's shoes, I would like to have an acolyte from a Shanahan tree. But if you're talking about one of these guys from Cohen or McVay, this would be their first time in the head man's chair coordinating an offense. If I'm Quinn, that's a huge risk. That's something you need to do your first year. If you're going to this make or break year for him, I think that the number one choice for me, assuming he doesn't get a head coaching job, is Todd Monken. He's proven he had an MVP year with Lamar Jackson. He runs an offense from college, from Georgia. He sprinkled in those elements along with NFL modern offense, passing. Obviously, he led Lamar to new heights. So that would be, if make or break year for Quinn, that would be my choice. But let me ask you a question, Kevin, real quick. I know this is about coordinator search, but
by the way, I think Monken's really good. Let me make myself clear. He would not be my first choice, though, and I don't think that it's necessarily in line with looking for a major philosophical change. But I don't disagree with you that Todd Monken isn't good at what he does. But go ahead.
Sure. No, absolutely. And so my question to you, Kevin, is I agree with you. I would also prefer this day and age, especially with Quinn's his defense struggling with Shanahan offenses, I would want someone from the Shanahan coaching tree. But if you're going to get someone like that, and again, I go to the fact that whoever you hire, it's a gamble with a young guy being his first-time coordinator, assuming you go from someone from Cohen or McVay, if you go that route. Why not just skip right to the source, you mentioned his name, and you would have to. It would be a big swing. It would be people would say Snyder-esque, but why not just wait and go with Clint Kubiak? You saw what he did with Seattle. He continues Sam Darnold's progression. That offense with it's just one guy, basically JSN, which could be your.
What, to hire him as the head coach?
Run the ball. Yeah, yes. Blow everybody out. Just go with Kubiak. You go with an offensive guy. You don't have to worry about coordinators anymore. Just if you skip ahead 1 year, if Quinn gets this wrong, and we're here next year, he'll be gone, and then you have to start over anyway. Why not just go right for your Shanahan guy now, like you could have done with Ben Johnson or another offensive candidate, and just peel it off the Band-Aid? Because I get what you say about Quinn. He's a good leader of men. I understand all that, but I think he's panicking right now. With him or Peters, he fired both guys. It's him alone that's standing. If this goes sideways, you're wasting now 1-2 years of Daniels in his rookie contract prime, and now you're going 1 year closer to he's gonna get paid. It's gonna be harder than ever. I'd rather just go right. If you really like Kubiak and that Shanahan system, and which I think he's gonna be the next really hot coaching candidate if Seattle goes far, which they might.
Yeah.
Why not just wait for him and just go right to the source? I just want to get your thoughts. Thanks.
Look, I like the out of the box thinking. I mean, it's kind of, the first time I remember, and I reference my friend Chris a lot, but when Cooley basically said, if I were Dan, I'd fire Jay Gruden and I'd elevate Sean McVay to head coach right now. And people are like, what are you talking about? He was the tight ends coach at the time. Now, let me just tell you something, in my opinion, because I watched Clint Kubiak a little bit when he was in Minnesota with you-know-who at quarterback, and he was the coordinator in 2021, 2022 for Kirk and that particular season. He strikes me as so soft-spoken, so non-alpha, that I wonder what kind of head coach Clint Kubiak will be. That's all. I mean, Kubiak was in New Orleans, remember, last year, and that was a mess in New Orleans last year as the offensive coordinator. But there's just something about Clint, and, if you've ever seen any of his press conferences, incredibly soft-spoken, incredibly, just background, not in your, he's not great as a front-facing guy. But that doesn't mean much, if he's a quiet leader, but that's what he would be. But, he was also with Mike Zimmer, more of an alpha when he was the head coach there than he was with Kyle in San Francisco. Yeah. And now obviously in Seattle with Mike McDonald. He's doing a hell of a job with Sam Darnold, which kind of got started last year. They also have one of the most incredible weapons in the league in Smith and the Jigba. But they're not going to make that jump, just so it's decent out of the box thinking, but they're not firing Dan Quinn to hire Clint Kubiak to be the head coach. If they were going to do something like that, it would be to hire John Harbaugh to be the head coach. If there was like a belief and a love for Harbaugh, and Harbaugh didn't want to move out of the area or the general area. Ralphie in Rockville, go ahead.
Hey, Kevin, how you doing?
I'm good, Ralphie. How are you?
So I'm doing well. I got a lot to say. It's kind of organized in my head. So let me not take up too much of your time. So
go ahead.
For Dan Quinn's sake, I think that the defensive coordinator hire is going to be significantly more important for him than OC hire. I think, and I absolutely don't want Raheem Morris. So let me just put that aside.
By the way, if real quickly, if Harbaugh were to get, if Chris Shula gets a job as the defensive coordinator in the Rams, I bet you Raheem would go to Los Angeles before he would come here. He won a Super Bowl as their DC with Sean. But go ahead.
Got you, and I hope he does. I hope he stays far away from Ashburn. So based on Dan Quinn's personality, I believe the rift between him and Kingsbury was influenced by Adam Peters. I think Kingsbury and Peters are the two alphas in the room. Kingsbury certainly strikes me as an alpha. So, this goes back to training camp. So based on Kingsbury's quotes in training camp, JP Finley put it out there as well. But I remember hearing it. He was really frustrated with Terry not being there. And he didn't, I think that Kingsbury was more frustrated with Adam Peters, and it wasn't about the money. I think Kingsbury wanted Terry there regardless of how much money Terry's agent wanted. And then when you look at the skill position players, you could tell he was really frustrated. And I think Ben Standing and a lot of other beat writers reported on it. And Cliff said verbatim, Terry needs to be on the grass. And there was a sense of dissatisfaction on Cliff's face when he said it. And then I think that the best possible candidate for OC is already on the staff, and that's David Blau. I think that his ability to teach, and he already runs the scout team, and he has a familiarity with Jaden already. And I think that he needs to be the hire. If you hire somebody outside, it's going to take too long for them to ramp up. And I think that David Blau, his relationship with Terry, people speak really highly about him. I think he's the perfect candidate. I think you don't need to look anywhere else. So, that's
apparently it's super impressive to everybody. David Blau is now back to, thanks Ralphie for the call. Back to, the Cliff and Adam Peters and Terry McLaurin saga. I've heard some of that as well. Not to the point where there was a major kind of rift or disconnect or confrontational tone, but that's what coaches say all the time when there's a holdout of a key player. It's not that unusual. I think if you go back to that time, I think Adam Peters for a while, and many in that front office were a little bit frustrated that they couldn't get the message out that, and I was here talking about this, that you guys don't understand this. The offer that we made Terry and his agent is a sign that we actually do want him to play for us, that we do really like Terry. And it was being framed, over the summer as they don't believe in Terry. They don't, they're disrespecting Terry. And from their standpoint, and I know this as a fact, and we talked about it over the summer, their position was, you guys are missing the point here. The offer that we've made is an indication of how much we do like him and how much we do want him back. Their side is the side that's completely detached from reality. And you can't say that publicly when you're going through negotiations. You can get some of that messaging out. We talked about it here on the show. And, we knew from some of the national reporting that Terry was asking for just outrageous, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson kind of money to begin with that completely rocked, Adam Peters. So, if there is a coordinator, even a head coach, it says it'd be really nice to get this thing done. We miss Terry right now. We miss not having him. These are important days. That's the typical reaction of the coach. But the coach, and by the way, Cliff is not a dumb guy. Cliff's a pretty bright guy. He's got that Texas kind of, swagger and confidence, but he's also incredibly smart, incredibly likable. He knows his role, in all of that. He knows he's not in the negotiations and that there's, two sides to every story. He was just expressing it'd be really nice to have, our guy here for time on task, which is one of his favorite, sort of expressions. We need time on task together because it was a new thing, with Debo added and with the offensive line changed a little bit and no Diami and no Olamide and, no Brian Robinson Jr. eventually. They needed the time on task, and that's not unusual. But with respect to what you said, and I haven't really followed a lot of the reporting, but yes, it's one of the things that I've heard too, is that there was some frustration with not just Cliff, but a couple of other people in the building that were like, can you get this freaking thing done? We need Terry McLaurin back on the field. We're not getting in the proper work to get ready for this season. Now, with respect to losing Zacchaeus and Diami Brown, I don't know that. If that was something that he was upset about and he felt like he was being given less in terms of tools to work with, I don't know. I did not hear that. Anthony, go ahead.
Kevin.
Anthony.
Hello?
You're up.
Hey, Kevin, what's up? All right,
How you doing,
okay,
Anthony?
So I'm doing great. This Anthony from Twitter, by the way. Yeah, so I'm
What's up,
doing
Anthony?
good, man. So nothing much. So check this out. I like Cliff, man. I really do and stuff. But I kind of knew about his offense even before we hired him last year and stuff. It's a very rigid offense. What I mean by that, it's not necessarily goes towards the talents, strengths and weaknesses. It's more so all about the offense, and the talent has to fit that offense. And to me, that's a red flag in my opinion, because I'm kind of like old school with it a little bit, like how Don Shula used to think, like, he'll get the talent and make any offense fit for that talent. And that's the way you should be coaching, but that's not what his air raid offense was. So I kind of figured that
it wasn't air raid. The air raid and the spread is not what you saw in the NFL. You can't even run those offenses in the NFL. Are there elements to it in pass design? But
that's what I mean.
This frustrates me because it's from people that never watch college football and talk about they're running the air raid. This is Hal Mummy's offense. This is Mike Leach's offense. No, it is not. It's not anything resembling it. And it wasn't in Arizona either. Are there elements to it of pass routes and schemes? Of course. But just so you know, the college game's completely different. And things you can do in college you can't do in the NFL because of hash mark differences, because of rule differences, because of, by the way, major talent disparity differences. But anyway, pet peeve on that. Continue.
Yeah, I agree with you. I didn't mean it, to go that route, but I was just saying it's certain elements of it that, that's just not like what I could say like talent friendly. It's just more about the scheme. So I would say that it's the scheme.
Well, it was the perfect fit for Jaden last year. You'd agree with that, right?
Oh, most definitely and stuff. But it catches up with you. People will figure it out like towards the end of the year. They will start figuring things out and stuff. But nevertheless, I think the guy's in the building. He's already in the building. It's David Blau. The other caller said it before me. He beat me to my punch. That's the guy. And I'm gonna tell you why. Even Cliff said this guy is like a savant or something like that. He said he knew his offense like within 2 weeks. He mastered his whole offense in 2 weeks. So I'm hearing stuff like that, and I'm getting flashbacks of McVay and everything. And we can't let this guy leave the building. It's people in Detroit trying to interview him right now for that same position.
Right. Okay, thanks. Appreciate it. Yeah. Let's go to Bay in D.C. Finish it up for me.
Hey, what's going on, Captain? Happy New Year.
Hey, Bay, man. How are you?
I'm doing good. Hey, Captain, I honestly believe, this is my belief, that this call came from the ownership. And the reason I believe that is because we get ready to go into this new stadium. Next year is going to be the NFL draft year. We cannot have another season like we had this year moving forward, that we're going to have to be able to market the fans that's going to be coming into this particular stadium.
Well, the stadium's not built until 2030, Bay. Bay, the stadium doesn't open until 2030. They're playing 4 more seasons in Landover.
Yeah, you want to be consistent while you're going into it. You can't say, okay, well, a year before we go into this new stadium, we're changing coaching staff. They're stirring things up.
We might be on the third coaching staff by the time a third new coaching staff by the time we moved it into the new stadium. That's way down the road. They're not thinking about the new stadium right now. They're thinking about 2026, 2027. And by the way, about a $500 million contract they're going to have to pay the quarterback.
Bingo.
Yeah. So what else? Sorry.
That bingo was all he had left.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't think right now, first of all, I don't think ownership had much to do with this. I think ownership handles Adam Peters and Dan Quinn as follows. Tell me what you want to do. Now tell me why you want to do it. And if the why makes sense to the what, ownership says go do it. That's been Josh Harris's style. He's not a meddler. He's not Dan Snyder saying, this is what we're going to do. We're going to draft Dwayne Haskins. Sorry, I know you guys have put in all the work, but this is what we're going to do. That's not Josh Harris. Josh Harris didn't come in and say, you got to get rid of Cliff Kingsbury because we're moving into a new stadium in 2030. Well, that doesn't even make sense. But he is an owner, from what I've been told, that will say, Tell me what you guys are doing and give me the reasons why. And he just wants the reasons why to make sense. By the way, that's pretty good leadership. And in this day and age, too, I would just say the idea that someone who spends $6 billion for a team is not going to have some influence, isn't going to be involved, is absurd and unrealistic. But his style, from everybody I've talked to over the last 2 years, is exactly what I described. Tell me what you're going to do. Explain what you're going to do. Tell me why you are going to do what you're going to do. If it doesn't make sense to him, if the reasons why don't make sense, there could be some pushback. But as long as there's some intelligent thought that goes into the decisions that are made, go do it. Let's do it. But like any other owner, ultimately, they'll be judged on results. And the results now, after 2 years, are really good and not so good. And then it's how you frame that not so good, and how you contextualize the not so good. Couple more thoughts on this. And then Bobby Trossett, who covers the Ravens with one of the top Ravens YouTube shows, friend of mine, he's been on the show many times. We'll find out what happened in Baltimore and what's next in Baltimore. That's at noon. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. I'm a little slow to the punch on things at times. Ben sent me, Ben Standing did, a tweet that he tweeted out last night where he had NFL coaching carousel guesses. And he had Stefanski to the Giants, Harbaugh to Atlanta, Matt Nagy to Tennessee, Jesse Minter to Baltimore, Chris Shula to Cleveland, Kubiak or Udinsky to Vegas, and Brian Flores to Arizona. That would be a story. And the part that I missed is Cliff Kingsbury replaces Nagy in Kansas City, reunites with Mahomes, becomes Reed's heir apparent. Sorry, Ben, because what I responded to you tonight had nothing to do with your tweet. I actually said, yes, Shula to Cleveland means Raheem to the Rams. But I just digested it, and I get where you were going. I just didn't read the second part. Kingsbury replaces Nagy in Kansas City. That would make total sense. Reunites with Mahomes and becomes Reed's heir apparent. That would, obviously be a possibility. But the other part of that would be what Max sort of at one point predicted. And that is, if Matt Nagy left Kansas City, got a head coaching job, it would make a lot of sense for Kingsbury to go to Kansas City to reunite with Mahomes. And you know what else would make sense? Marcus Mariota to follow Cliff Kingsbury to Kansas City, where he would start the beginning of next season until Mahomes is healthy and ready to go coming off the torn ACL.
We're doing the knowledge. We're opening our third eye on this show. We're seeing it all.
But I like Ben's thinking. There's a lot. Now, is Matt Nagy going to get a head coaching job?
I think he's going to get hired by the Titans. If I had to make a pick
that's what Ben's predicting.
Yeah, and
okay,
there's just a lot of smoke there, and he's had coaching experience, and above all, I think he can get into an interview and charm a bad owner into hiring him. That's for sure.
Yeah. I mean, this team should want Marcus Mariota back.
Absolutely.
For next year. Now, on one hand, it's like, look, if you don't have Jaden Daniels next year for 17 games, 15, 16, 17 games, there's going to be a whole change anyway. I mean, I love Marcus Mariota as a backup quarterback. There's no doubt. But by the way, in a different scheme that's not necessarily tailor-made for him, you could make the case that Cliff's offensive approach fit Marcus Mariota as well as it fit Jaden Daniels. But with Marcus Mariota, there aren't as many fits for him as there are for Jaden. I think Jaden would thrive in almost any offensive scheme. Marcus Mariota thrived more than he ever had before in Cliff Kingsbury's offensive scheme. So what I'm saying is, if you get a new offensive coordinator, it may not be as imperative to have Marcus Mariota as the backup next year. There may be another backup that would fit just as well if it's a completely new offensive approach. But, I mean, Jaden loves Kingsbury. Mariota loves Kingsbury too.
Mm-hmm.
So if wherever Cliff ends up, forget if it's just Kansas City, but wherever Cliff ends up, if it's as an offensive coordinator or if it's as a head coach, there's a chance Mariota goes with him.
And so there's also another thing from Hard Knocks last night. I actually want to play it. It's about 45 seconds. David Blau was leading a meeting in the quarterback room, and they were talking about being grateful for things. And I actually listened to what Marcus Mariota said during this clip.
The thought of the day, what is one lesson you've learned this year? Josh?
The biggest thing for me was gratitude is more powerful than control.
Come on.
We are highly driven people here, and it just puts your heart in the right place to be able to take on what you need to take on to continue to grow.
Gratitude for every op. So good. Marcus?
For me personally, it's like how much I love playing. Like getting the chance to play a bunch this year. Whenever you get the chance to be out there, you're just grateful for it because it's not always promised.
Number 5.
I guess applying to my life that all the great ones, successful ones have been through some type of adversity in their life, and everybody has to go through it.
Right on.
Loves playing. Going to get a lot of that time in Kansas City if it's open.
The second one was Mariota.
The second one was Mariota.
Got it. And that was David Blau?
Yeah, David Blau is leading the meeting since Tavita Pritchard is now at Stanford.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I stopped watching. I actually enjoyed
so did
it.
I just see the clips now.
So that was last night's episode?
Yes,
Is that the last episode?
I think so.
Yeah, because the
regular season's over.
3 of the 4 NFC East teams are done.
Yeah, I mean they changed the picture.
I mean, it would
at
be
the front
great to
just an
see the
Eagles
next
logo.
episode with what just went on here.
Yeah,
if they had any,
if they had some lingering camera crews around.
Yeah,
make for great TV.
I liked Josh. That was Josh Johnson that started it off, right?
Yeah,
I loved his answer.
Yeah, good answer.
Loved his answer.
All 3 were great, actually.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I mean, wherever Cliff goes, pretty good chance Mariota goes with him. Don't you think?
I would think so.
Even money.
Yeah.
Now if Kingsbury went to Baltimore, Huntley's the backup. I don't know what Huntley's contract situation is. Mariota's an unrestricted free agent for those that don't know. So, and if Cliff came back, I would have assumed it would have been Jaden and Cliff in the quarterback room next year. It would have been Jaden and Marcus as the top 2. I think Marcus would have re-signed here, but we'll see. All right. Up next, the Baltimore bombshell yesterday. After 18 years, John Harbaugh is out. Bobby Trossitz covered the Ravens for a few years. He'll join us to discuss why it happened and what's next. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. All right, joining me right now to talk about the Ravens situation is my friend Bobby Trossett, at Bobby Baltimore on X on Twitter. Bobby is the co-host of The Vault, which is a Baltimore YouTube podcast talking Baltimore sports and these days primarily Ravens. So, level of surprise for you, Bobby, was what?
Oh, man. First of all, it's great to be back with you. Running on fumes and a cat nap here, so excuse my limited English at times. But no, for Steve Bisciotti to have pulled the plug, Kevin, the way that he did, and all you have to do is go read the statements, and it becomes abundantly clear that this was not a mutual parting of ways. And so for it to have ended like that after 18 years, the second longest tenure behind Mike Tomlin in Pittsburgh, that's what has my shock scale over a 10. But if you've been watching this team and its shortcomings throughout the Lamar era in this month of January, where they just simply have become shells of themselves in what they've been in the regular season with hardware for Lamar and over 70% of the games in which he starts, he wins, and they mow down competition. For them to take on a completely different DNA this month and not even play meaningful football this month, meaning in the postseason, with that roster, the way that it was projected universally to be top 3 up there with the Philadelphias and the Detroits, it's no surprise that Steve ultimately had to make the decision to go with his franchise quarterback. And now obviously the search begins for just the 4th head coach in their 30 years of existence.
Was it ultimately cumulative, meaning, the lack of playoff success in recent years, the expectations as you just described them, or did Lamar have a lot to do with it?
I wouldn't be surprised if the latter, first of all across the board, right? All the above. I think the easy answer is that. But Jeff Zrebiec, look, I know you've had him on the program. We do a YouTube show together called The Ravens Collective on Tuesday nights. It's fresh in my mind. We were up late last night, and the reporting that he shared was that John Harbaugh actually acted as a buffer between Todd Monken, Ravens offensive coordinator, and Lamar. Meaning there wasn't any hatred between the two. It wasn't untenable. It was a clearly successful working relationship. I mean, God, last year he could have had his second MVP season had it not gone to Josh Allen. And in the 3 years that Todd was playing, was calling plays for the Ravens offense, he took him to new heights and brought Lamar Jackson as a passer to new levels. But Jeff is as plugged in as anyone. I certainly trust his reporting, and the fact that there clearly was a disconnect between the play caller and the quarterback was something that I would imagine more so than anything else.
If Harbaugh had committed to moving on from Todd Monken, would he still be the head coach?
I certainly think there's a case to be made on that. Yeah. I mean, look, these reports are telling. And I think ultimately John stood tall. I wouldn't be surprised if that tandem, meaning wherever John lands, and his play caller Todd Monken goes with him, that would not surprise me at all. And as you know, and I'm sure you guys have been paying attention from a Commander's perspective, there are plenty of teams out there with and without head coaches filled that reportedly have interest here in the first not even 24 hours.
If Tyler Loop makes the field goal on Sunday night, obviously he's still the coach for at least another week, but it kind of sounds like maybe they were headed for a split regardless, unless maybe they went on a run to the Super Bowl. Do you think that, Tyler Loop's, making of a field goal would have changed the eventual outcome?
I think this was brewing.
You do, yeah.
I mean, this is a team that finished 3-6 at home this year, below 500 for the third time in franchise history. They struggled in prime time, which is completely uncharacteristic. Obviously, Lamar Jackson was a shell of himself this year, most of which was due to lower body ailments, including a really painful back contusion that he sustained against the Patriots on Sunday Night Football in the closing weeks. Snoop Huntley had to come in and lead them to victory against, ironically, two teams that are going to play meaningful football this month in Chicago and Green Bay. So yeah, no, in no way. I mean, did it accelerate things that wide right miss from the rookie? Of course. But with this conversation, next week, had they hosted a home playoff game against the red hot Texans, why wouldn't we be having this conversation next week? I could have totally seen that scenario taking place as well.
Lamar never looked right this year. You just talked about some of the injuries. He played, I think, in 13 of the 17 games. Missing 4 is enough in terms of the difference between playoffs and no playoffs. But even when he played, he didn't look the same. Why?
Oh man, it's a perfect storm. Their guard play was lackluster. That falls on the front office. Both of their guards, I think they have to retool and ultimately replace them this offseason. But for me, it starts with Lamar Jackson's physical setbacks, to your point, and then I alluded to a minute ago, it began with a hamstring. There was a foot, there was an ankle, there was a knee, there was a back contusion, there was a toe. I mean, all year long, he just could not get himself right. And so when you couple that with an offensive line collectively that regressed as a group, you're going to have issues. And the defense just really they didn't play complementary. There was not one game outside of maybe the 2 that Snoop started that I just mentioned, Chicago and Green Bay, that you had complementary football being played. And you add that into a murderer's row beginning of the season, Kevin, where that first place schedule kicked him in the arse, and you're sitting at 1-5. It was just an uphill battle from there, and a razor thin margin of error in the closing months.
What's the fan reaction to this? Like, I remember when Andy Reid in Philadelphia, was a 13, 14, 15-year run, something like that. Now, he didn't win a Super Bowl, but the teams were very good. They were in the playoffs, a bunch. They were in NFC championship games. They went to a Super Bowl and lost to the Patriots in 2004, I think it was. But in Philadelphia fans, the run, it had run its course. They were ready for something new. Is that the Baltimore fan reaction or not?
Yes, but on my show late last night, and maybe this was just more vulnerable hours, right, with guest callers and call-ins that I was conducting last night, the question I posed to everybody was it as satisfying? Is it as satisfying as you hoped it would be, as you anticipated it? Because
right.
As you know, just like it is in Pittsburgh, and I'm sure you've seen this, Kevin, throughout the NFL fan base circles online. People have been calling for Tomlin and Harbaugh's heads in those respective fan bases for years. Yeah. That's just how it goes when you're at the top and you've had their kind of tenure and continuity and consistency, but a level of underachievement in the postseason. And you know what? It was really interesting. People last night, I think once the reality set in, my callers went in the direction of, damn, like, it's not guaranteed to be perennial contenders from this point forward. And it's not a guarantee that this will be a home run hire. I think it's the most attractive hire out there. I think Steve Bisciotti will leave no stone unturned. It's a really attractive job. And so long as Lamar Jackson gets an extension done this offseason and remains healthy in 2026, they're going to be a contender. But there's a certain level of CEO and a winning pedigree and an old school mentality that just walked out the door. And that comes with a level of uncertainty going into where the Ravens haven't been in close to 2 decades and that searching for a new head coach.
So what's next? Where do they go? Give me your thoughts on what you would like to see and what you think you'll see.
I think I'm in the minority on my pick so far. I'm still processing this 48 hours in, but I really like Robert Saleh. I think he was given a raw deal in New York. I think what the Ravens need to do moving forward is reestablish what made them one of the most revered organizations in all of sports. And that's defense, that's physicality, that's toughness, that's resiliency. And we just hadn't seen a lot of that since Mike McDonald walked out the door. There's a lot of people obviously in Baltimore licking their wounds, knowing that Mike has went on to have tremendous success in Seattle. But Kevin, you and I both know that it's not good business to take your team to an AFC championship game where you hadn't been in the Lamar Jackson era and you get canned the following offseason. Steve Bisciotti never would have done that. to John Harbaugh. So it just wouldn't have been a realistic decision. I know it's an emotional time for Ravens fans knowing that Mike's went on to have that kind of success. But I would lean defensively. Obviously, Jesse Minter comes to mind. He's getting a ton of pub, deservedly so. That would be within the Harbaugh tree, though. And honestly, Kevin, I would be an advocate of a clean slate. That's no disrespect to the Harbaugh tree. He's been a tremendous hiring manager. The amount of folks underneath him and his assistants over the years that have gone on to have success as either head coaches or assistants elsewhere that have come up through the ranks under his tutelage, it's an endless list. But I think it would behoove them for a clean slate, and I think Lamar Jackson probably would sign up for that as well.
Who would be the offensive coordinator?
Well, I'll throw that back to you. Do you think Cliff deserves another chance?
Yeah, I think Cliff's a good coach. I think he's a really good coach. I think that, that just like what you said, fan reaction, I'm not describing the fan reaction here. I'm describing my reaction, actually. But just what you said, there's no guarantees. You can do a lot better. And this guy in 2024 coordinated and called an elite level offensive football team in 2024. And this year, he just didn't have players. He didn't have his quarterback. He didn't have his wide receiver. Terry McLaurin and Jaden Daniels played 2 games together out of 17. So, I think he'd be perfect for Lamar. So do you think that's in play?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, gosh, I saw Rossini's been pushing that since the moment this thing came down. So, and look, people are quick to denounce that in Baltimore. I don't know why. I mean, do they just think back to obviously what happened this year with Washington, most of which was due to Jaden's unavailability, right? Or they go back to Arizona. I don't know what it is, but I'm certainly not one to just look the other way. I'd be intrigued by that for sure. And look, while I lean towards the defensive culture and resetting what they've established their Ravens brand on over the last 30 years, I can't sit here and tell you that a perennial candidate for MVP shouldn't have a head coach that's a brilliant offensive mind. Like I would be receptive to that, of course. But what I'm trying to tell you is, having watched this team thoroughly the last couple of years since Mike McDonald walked out the door, they've lacked an identity on that side of the football.
Right.
And obviously that's what wins the championships when it's all said and done. And then as long as Lamar is healthy, they're going to be able to put up points no matter what this offense is constructed like.
Thanks for doing this. I know you're swamped. Appreciate it. Hope you're well.
It's great to hear from you. Thank you.
Bobby Trossett, everybody. Man, that's an interesting situation. I thought that when you get somebody that's been there forever, and the Andy Reid situation in Philadelphia is very comparable to the Harbaugh situation in Baltimore, where you're there for so long, that eventually it just wears thin. It's like people, fans, and even people in ownership, they just want to do something different. They want to try something new, especially if you're not winning Super Bowls every year or going to Super Bowls every year. In Philadelphia, they went to the one Super Bowl, right? 2004 when they lost to the Patriots with Andy Reid. John Harbaugh's been to one Super Bowl. Joe Flacco was the quarterback in the MVP. They actually had a lot more playoff success during the Flacco years than they had with their MVP quarterback in Lamar Jackson. But once it happens, then it gets like, can we actually do better than that? You see it in college a lot. You see it so much more in college sports, where college fan bases, super rabid college fan bases, get to that point where they're like, he's got to go. Can't stand the offense he runs. Can't stand the stupid timeouts or whatever it is. But you're going to the tournament every year, in college basketball. You're just not, winning the national championship or getting to Final Fours. Be careful what you wish for, because the grass is not always greener on the other side. And I'm not applying that to the Cliff Kingsbury situation. He was only here for 2 years. I mean, it is possible that the grass isn't greener on the other side. But the long-tenured coaches, where you are a good team every year, where you're considered to be a contender every single year, even if you fall short. The expectations are high. It can shift, man, and it can shift in a hurry in the NFL. The NFL is so dynamic. It's so changing. You know, we talk about it being a week-to-week league, year-to-year league, month-to-month, whatever. It changes so much. And the franchises that keep that consistency at head coach and at quarterback in particular end up being the ones that have the best chance at having sustained success. So we'll see what happens. The odds are out on not only where John Harbaugh lands, but who lands in Baltimore and in some of the other places. We'll look at that when we come back. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. So by all accounts, right now, John Harbaugh is the most sought after coaching candidate, head coaching candidate we've seen in a while, man. We thought it was that way 2 years ago with Belichick, but Atlanta ultimately hired Raheem Morris. So right now there are 7 jobs available. But Max, you just told me that there's a report out there that 9 teams have reached out to Harbaugh to talk to him.
Yeah, and I'm trying to, for the life of me, figure out which teams that they are, because one of them obviously.
Well, we know the 7 openings. Arizona. Yes. Well, no, only Baltimore's an opening, so it's 6 openings. Arizona, the Raiders, the Giants, the Falcons, the Browns, the Titans. Those are the 6 teams with official openings, because Baltimore is the 7th, right? So there are another 3 teams, you're saying, that have reached out that have not fired their coaches.
According to some
Miami's got to be one of them, right?
Has to be. Like, given their season, it would have to be. I feel like the Jets are probably in there.
The Jets, for sure, are in there.
Aaron Glenn.
He wouldn't go to the Jets, though.
No. I think he's smart enough to realize that would the writing on the wall.
What about
on
Cincinnati?
No, I don't. Cincinnati's.
He wouldn't go to Cincinnati. I'm not. But by the way, we're not talking about where he would go. We were talking about trying to figure out the other 3 teams that have reached out. The 6 that have openings, because Baltimore's the 7th, and then the other 3 teams that have not fired their head coaches yet, but have reached out to talk to Harbaugh. We both agree Miami's one of them.
The Bengals seem content to go into this year with a still sinking ship in Zach Taylor and his coaching staff. So I don't think that the Bengals are the ones who reached out. Going down this list.
Didn't we think that Zach Taylor at one point this season was going to be gone?
Listen, this entire season, I thought it could be a possibility, but at the same time,
where is he on the salary scale? I'm going to guess way down the list. They're cheap.
Probably way down the list, and I think he's going into the final year of his deal. So I think the Bengals are just going to let Zach Taylor's contract run out and find a new coach after that. If I'm Joe Burrow, I'm furious and regretting every decision I made to stick around in Cincinnati. But hey,
I got a team.
Do you now?
Tampa Bay.
You know what?
We said Miami, Jets, Tampa Bay. Look, everybody loves Todd Bowles. By the way, how about this? Harbaugh goes to Tampa, and Todd Bowles comes to DC as the defensive coordinator.
Oh,
I would love Todd Bowles as the defensive coordinator.
Scream.
Would love it. The reason I say Tampa, and I'm trying to think of others, like it wouldn't be Dallas, right? It wouldn't be Dallas.
I don't think it would be Dallas. I think
it's not Washington.
I think Dallas likes Shoddy a lot.
Want to take calls on Harbaugh or Quinn?
You want to get the people going to close out the show?
I don't think. By the way, if I were a Cowboy fan and you gave me the choice of John Harbaugh or Brian Schottenheimer, yeah, see ya, Brian. I'm hiring John Harbaugh.
I probably would too, man.
What does Brian think?
Brian, get the mic in front of you.
What do you think, Brian? Would you take Harbaugh over Shoddy?
I'm kind of biased in this regard. I like coaches that call plays instead of the more CEO style coaches. So I would lean Shoddy.
Yeah, because he did such a great job this year.
Offensively, yes.
I know they were fine offensively. True. All right. Yeah, I'm just looking through the list of teams. I mean, Detroit, Minnesota, no. Green Bay, no. Washington, Giants already have, the opening. Cowboys, Eagles, no. Carolina, no. Tampa makes sense to me as that third team.
Yeah, I do think you're kind of right as we talk through it. Because Todd Bowles, I think in his end of season presser said, I believe the quote was, "I have earned the right to come back and coach this team." Anytime your head coach says that, probably doesn't have much of a leg to stand on to come back and coach the team.
Yeah, the question is, if Tampa moved on from Todd Bowles to hire John Harbaugh, would Todd Bowles be a head coaching candidate? I think he would. But anyway,
I think it depends on where we're at in the
cycle. I think we got one of the other 3 teams that have reached out about Harbaugh, in addition to the 6 with openings. Miami's a given.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Miami's the given. I think the Jets have probably reached out, at least in one way or another, just to test the waters. But
right.
Yeah, I like where you're at on Tampa.
So here's here are right now kind of a consensus of the odds for each team's head coaching hire of the teams that officially have openings. All right, that's what we're talking about here, the teams that officially have openings. The Arizona Cardinals right now, Clint Kubiak, the offensive coordinator in Seattle, is the favorite to be the head coach in Arizona. Not the greatest organization, Bidwell, etc. Vance Joseph, by the way, is a close second, the DC in Denver. So Kubiak favored to be the next head coach in Arizona. He's plus 300, by the way. All right, so 3-1 shot. Vance Joseph at plus 500. The odds on the next Ravens coach, listen closely. Jesse Minter, the defensive coordinator for Jim Harbaugh, not only at Michigan, but also with the Chargers, is the odds-on favorite at plus 150 to become the new Ravens head coach, followed by Cliff Kingsbury at plus 500. The new Raiders head coach, Brian Flores, minus 150 to be the new Raiders head coach.
I'd put my mortgage on it. That's how confident I am that Brian Flores is going to be the Raiders head coach.
Max Crosby would then be happy to play for Brian Flores.
He would have so much fun.
The Giants, John Harbaugh is the heavy favorite to be the Giants' new head coach. Just FYI. At minus 175. The Atlanta next head coach, Kevin Stefanski, is the favorite at plus 200, followed by Clint Kubiak at plus 300, and Mike LaFleur, Sean McVay's offensive coordinator who doesn't call plays, at plus 600. The next Cleveland head coach, the favorite right now at plus 500. So it's not
very wide range.
Barely favored over John Harbaugh and even Jim Schwartz, who is the defensive coordinator there. But the current favorite, consensus favorite, to be the new Cleveland Browns head coach is Cliff Kingsbury. I actually am we found this during the break, and I'm actually surprised. I expected to see Kingsbury's name in a couple of the spots. He's there as the second favorite in Baltimore behind Jesse Minter. He's also the fifth favorite in Vegas. He is the third favorite in Tennessee, but he's the favorite to be the new head coach in Cleveland. Who would the quarterback be? No way is he.
That's the thing. If Cliff
or Sanders, would he?
No. If Cliff turned down the Saints job last year when they were bringing in Tyler Shuck, why would he accept the Browns job? I get that he doesn't have Washington to come back to, but he could just get an OC job, like you said, in Kansas City and be just fine if Matt Nagy gets a head coaching gig.
I really liked Tyler Shuck's rookie season.
He was pretty.
I think he looked the part. Now that team has an excellent defense. Excellent defense.
They got to figure out the trenches. That's their big
And let me
thing.
just point this out because I was in a text back and forth with a friend of the show during that interview with Bobby Trossett, which I actually recorded before the show this morning. If you want, your next offensive coordinator to run the football more, to win games, you better improve dramatically your defense, because you've had an offensive coordinator here for 2 seasons who has been chasing every single week a defense that has been horrible. I mean, I actually went back and looked at this during the break. If you go back to last year, I want a coach who's going to break the other team's will running the football. Well, you better get a lead. And when they did last year, you know what they did most of the time against Arizona, against Tennessee, even to a certain extent against Detroit in the playoffs? They ran the football. They ran the clock. They dominated time of possession. They broke the other team's will. And it wasn't in those situations with the quarterback primarily. It was with Brian Robinson Jr., Austin Eckler, at times Chris Rodriguez even. Think about the Atlanta game. Think about some of those other games, including the Tennessee game. Think about what they did with Jeremy McNichols even in the Arizona game early in the year last year, where they rushed for an S-load of yards. What was the number of yards they rushed for in that area? I mean, they had a big lead. You know, part of why you're not seeing a breaking of the other team's will, running the ball down their throat, is you're behind by 2 scores too often. You want the next offensive coordinator to succeed and to have sustained success. Keep the quarterback upright, keep him healthy, and get a better GD defense. I mean, that's a big part of it, people. They get no short fields because they don't turn the ball over. And they're on the field so much that the offense comes back and it's like, we better score on this drive or we're gonna be down 2 scores. You know why they had all of those last-minute comebacks, those last-minute thrillers last year? Because they were behind. Because the defense sucked. And it was worse this year. It better be a lot better next year. This offensive coordinator thing, and look, we are justifiably focused on it the last 24 hours. It's more important that Dan Quinn fix the defense. The offense still has an elite level talent at quarterback. You better fix the defense so that elite level quarterback and whomever the new coordinator isn't taking the field every week down 7 or down 10 or 14. Fix the defense. You cannot. It's a miracle that they contended for an actual Super Bowl last year. A miracle, given how bad that defense was, especially how bad it was against the run. I mean, I still can't believe that Jahmyr Gibbs didn't get more than 14 carries in that playoff game last year. What was Ben Johnson thinking? All he had to do was hand it to Jahmyr Gibbs instead of 14 times, 24 times, and then they don't have the turnovers that they had having Jamison Williams throw a pass. They didn't need a double pass against our defense last year in the postseason. They just needed to hand it off to Jahmyr Gibbs. He averaged 10 yards a carry in the first half of that playoff game, and he ended with 14 carries in the game. You better fix the defense in this offseason, Dan Quinn and Adam Peters. That better be the priority because it won't matter who your offensive coordinator is. You can't send your quarterback and your offensive coordinator and anybody else on that offense out there every week knowing that you need to score 30 plus to have a chance. Fix the defense. I have zero concern that they don't have the quarterback. And I also feel like they'll probably find a coordinator, hopefully for his sake. But for Dan Quinn, the picking of the offensive coordinator is important. There's no doubt it is important. But you better fix the defense. You better coach up the defense. Cliff Kingsbury made chicken salad out of chicken you-know-what this year with this offense. It was not the case defensively with Joe Witt Jr. or Dan Quinn. That defense was not overperforming its parts. The offense did at times. You want to run to break somebody's will? Don't be behind every week by 2 scores. Fix the defense, for crying out loud. It really is actually, it's a surprise based on where we were last week or 2 weeks ago that Kingsbury's gone, not with the over weekend reporting. And it's an important part of the offense, Jaden Daniels' development, etc. But I'm telling you, man, the part that has to be focused on more than anything else is you can't be on the field and be a 7-on-7 scout team for the other team's offense. You can't. And that's what they were this year too much of the time. And that's what they were last year. And they, in some ways, got lucky that other teams didn't see it. I mean, Detroit didn't see it. Ben Johnson, I love Ben Johnson. He's great. He's creative. By the way, our offensive coordinator the last 2 years has been pretty creative. But Ben Johnson's super creative. He outthought it in the playoff game, having Jamison Williams throw a double pass interception. That's stupid against our defense. Dumb. You did not need Jared Goff to throw the ball 40-some-odd times against our defense. They averaged as a team in the playoff game. I'm looking at it right now. Now, part of this was the Jamison Williams reverse for a touchdown where he basically was untouched. Remember that play? He literally on a reverse was basically untouched, 61 yards. But they averaged 8.7 yards per carry. They rushed for 201 yards. But they only had 23 carries in the game. That, if I had been in Detroit last year as a Lions person, I would have absolutely crucified Ben Johnson for the way he called that game. You had a team that couldn't stop breath on defense. And you had a running back in the first half that averaged over 10 yards a carry. Steve Suter said to me this year when Detroit came in and blasted us, could have scored 80 in the game if they had wanted to. That's not an exaggeration. I mean, they certainly could have scored 70 if they had wanted to. What did they win? They won 44-22 in the game. And he said it was so bad in watching it on the All-22. He said he was convinced that if Dan Campbell, who had taken over play calling responsibilities for Johnny Morton, who they fired, by the way, if he had not had Jared Goff throw one pass in the football game, that they just handed the ball off to Gibbs and Montgomery, that they still would have won the game like 24-10, something like that. They rushed for 226 yards. Gibbs had 142 on 15 carries. Montgomery had 71 on 15. They averaged 6.8 yards per carry. You better fix the defense. Yes, injuries played a factor in whatever the defense was going to become this year, but it sucked in 2024, and it wasn't going to be good even if Dorrance Armstrong and Dietrich Wise and Will Harris and Marshawn Lattimore and Trey Amos and everybody else had stayed and played all 17. You could see that early in the season. Again, I'll tell you what, you could even see it against the Giants a little bit, against Green Bay. The Raiders, who couldn't do anything against anybody, rolled up yards and points against this defense, and then Atlanta torched us. So before it got really bad with the injuries, it still wasn't very good. You want the offensive coordinator and the offense, and you want the team to be a better team next year, fix the defense. You cannot send the new offensive coordinator out there, even with Superman at quarterback, week in and week out, down 14. Down 2 scores. And you're certainly not going to be in position for what some of you want, which is to line it up and play slobber knocker football and hand the ball off to the running back 40 times and just break the other team's will. You're not going to do that with a terrible defense. It doesn't work that way. Back to the coaching stuff. I think the most interesting hire for me is the fact that Matt Nagy is such a heavy favorite to be the head coach in Tennessee. I don't think Matt Nagy is a head coach.
I don't think so either, which is why I think the Titans are going to hire him.
With Cam Ward, to be honest with you, that's where I would definitely think about a Cliff Kingsbury in Tennessee. Cam Ward actually had some moments this year as a rookie, and it's too early. He got hurt, by the way, on Sunday. I mean,
sprained AC joint, he'll be fine.
Yeah, but it was a big hit.
It was.
It was a huge hit.
It's concerning.
Yeah. Why am I blanking on this? Where does Cleveland pick? They pick right before us?
Yeah, they pick 6.
Okay, so not a Mendoza or they're not going to get the quarterback that they want.
Simpson? Which would be really
Ty Simpson's not
so funny.
All due respect
It's
to Ty
not.
Simpson, there's no way I would ever use number 6 on Ty Simpson.
I'm with you, man. But hey, GMs can be GMs sometimes.
I wonder what Cliff Kingsbury thinks of Dylan Gabriel. I mean, he's 5'9", all of it. but he is one quick processing quarterback. Unlike Shadur, who is a slower processing quarterback, but Shadur is more physically imposing. I don't know. I haven't seen, by the way, of course I would have given this to you guys. I haven't seen, and I've looked for it, odds, OC odds and DC odds for Washington. The Tampa thing, though, the exercise that we just went through, 9 teams have contacted Harbaugh. So the 6 with openings, because Baltimore is obviously the 7th, and then the other 3 teams, and we came up with the Miami, with the Dolphins, Jets, and Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay moving on from Todd Bowles to hire John Harbaugh would be really interesting.
I'd do backflips through this studio if we got Todd Bowles, dude. That defense is insane.
Every single coach, head coach, and offensive coordinator, every single week raves in their press conferences about going up against Todd Bowles and his defense. By the way, his defense was outstanding on Saturday in the game they had to have against Carolina. All right, we got a few other things to wrap up the show with after this. From Joe, Kevin, watch the Wizards for the first time this year. So much for your guy, Trey Johnson. What are you talking about, Joe? I guess he watched him last night. He was 2 for 7. He was 0 for 4 from behind the arc. The Wizards won again, by the way. They've now won 5 out of their last 7. 5 out of their last 7.
Something like on Trey. He just went like 8 of 8 from 3 like a week ago, bro. I don't know what this guy's
the guy's having
about.
a phenomenal rookie season. Everything I said about Trey Johnson and the reason I wanted him to be selected has come to fruition. The guy's having an outstanding rookie season. Look, I'm not watching like I typically do, I'll admit, but he's shooting, 41.5% from behind the arc. He's at 45% plus overall from the field. He's averaging 12.2 points per game in 23 minutes a night. He's having a very, very solid rookie season. The Wizards won last night, 120-112 against Orlando. I didn't watch any of it. God, man, this is the least amount of Wizards I've ever it's zero interest. But Alex Sarr's having himself a season, people. 5 more blocked shots last night. He is turning into an absolute defensive force. Just remind everybody, he was the number 2 pick in the draft. He's averaging right now, it's like over 2 blocks a game, isn't it? I think he's leading the league in block shots now. Is he? He's leading the league right now. 2.4 block shots per game. Leads the NBA in block shots.
Bilal set a career high in steals last night, too. 5.
How many steals did he have?
He had 5.
He can defend. He can really defend.
Boys are coming on.
I mean, we talked about this with Josh Robbins yesterday and talking about the Trae Young possibility. It would be organizational malpractice if they lost their first-round pick because they were too good this year. I'm sorry, because I know, I'm a diehard Wizards fan from birth, and I want this team to be relevant again. I loved some of those years with John and Brad and Nene and Gortat and Pierce and Trevor. I loved some of those teams. Loved being, somewhat in the mix in May, playing a game 7 in Boston, winning, 3 different playoff series over a 4-year period. I loved that. But you have to be in the lottery this upcoming season. This is a big-time draft in 2026. This is what you've been doing. If they finish outside of the worst 4 records in the NBA, we've talked about this before, including yesterday with Josh Robbins from The Athletic. If they finish outside better than the worst 4 in the league, they could potentially end up after the draft lottery with the 9th pick, and anything from 9 back to 30 in terms of draft position, they lose their first-round pick to the New York Knicks. Now, if they finished with the 5th worst record, it isn't a guarantee that they'd end up with number 9. But if they got the worst possible draft lottery luck, they could. They have to be one of the 4 worst teams. Right now, they are the 4th worst team. But they've also won 5 out of their last 7 games, including last night against Orlando. We have our Team 980 poll question of the day up on Twitter at Team 980. It's driven by Waldorf Honda. It all starts with a click, waldorfhonda.com. The question is, who would you like to see the Commanders hire as their OC? Kevin Stefanski, Brian Dable, and Mike LaFleur are the 3 named answers, and then we gave a 4th as other. Right now, Mike LaFleur at 35.8%, barely over Kevin Stefanski at 32.8%, is the choice. Want to just mention that if you're in the market for windows, please give Window Nation a shot. I promise you they'll take really good care of you. As a listener to this show, I've been with Window Nation for 17 years now, endorsing their product. It always goes well. They take really good care of their customers. They've got over 45,000 5-star reviews. They've got a number 1 rating from Forbes magazine in terms of window installation companies across the United States. And they're currently offering a buy 4, get 4 free deal with an opportunity, if you choose to finance the purchase, of not paying anything for 2 years. No money down, no monthly payments, and 0% interest for 2 years. You want high-quality windows to reduce your heating bills in the wintertime, your air conditioning bills in the summertime. Reach out to Window Nation and schedule your free in-home estimate right now. 866-90-NATION, windownation.com. Chris Russell's next.